Okay. Gemma, if you can just go back to presenting your screen, because it's gone off, but welcome everybody. Welcome to the third session of our multi-agency child exploitation programme of learning. Hopefully those of you who came to our sessions yesterday really enjoyed them, and we've got another amazing session for you today. So this one we're going to look at working together to disrupt child exploitation in North Yorkshire and give you a really clear picture of what disruption actually looks like and the roles that we all have in disrupting exploitation. And I'm really pleased to say we've got Detective Sergeant Zoe Coots from the North Yorkshire Police Missing and Exploitation team, and we've got our operational MACE lead Gemma, who you may have come across before, who chairs our MACE level 2 meetings as well. Gemma, can you bob on to the next slide, please? So, as I've already said, this programme of learning was put in place for Child Exploitation Awareness Day, which was yesterday, but as a partnership we've been particularly greedy and we've decided to raise awareness all week in terms of child exploitation, because it's something we should be actively working to raise awareness of every day, really. So just a couple of things on this slide in terms of how you can get involved. The key bits really is to follow the partnership on our social media channels. So we've got X, Instagram and Facebook. Right through the week we're putting posts up every day, a couple every day really. So again, it's easy for you to just like or share those across your own social media platforms, and continue to kind of share and promote the Be Aware resources and all of our child exploitation resources across your teams. We're really kind of keen on getting as much of the resources and information out across community spaces. So again, those contextual spaces where young people are spending their time, it would be nice if we could look at promoting the information, the posters that we've got. So if you need any more information, if you need some posters, please get in touch with me and I can get them posted out to you. On to the next one, please, Gemma. As I've already said, we've got loads of kind of social media graphics, so keep an eye out for those, and you can like and share those. And then on to the next one. And this is our programme of learning for those of you who haven't seen it. So we're obviously on the partnership disruption in North Yorkshire session, but keep a lookout for some amazing sessions right towards the end of the week. We're going right until Friday, and we've got a fantastic session around financial exploitation, which is a really new and emerging form of exploitation that will be particularly useful to kind of get some insight into. Just be aware we will try and record where we can, and we will look to add all the learning sessions onto our partnership YouTube channel. So if you click on YouTube and put in NYSCP, we'll come up, you can like and subscribe, and then you'll get all the notifications of when the sessions will be available. So I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Gemma and Zoe. Thank you very much for helping us today. I'll turn my camera off and leave you to it.
Yeah, so I'll just get my notes page up and then we'll look to make a start, if that's okay with everybody. So as I've brought my notes page up, everybody disappears, so feel free to shout up with any questions as we go through. So again, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Gemma, and obviously I'm here with Zoe. So good afternoon, Zoe. If you'd like to introduce yourself, obviously please feel free.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Zoe Coots. I'm a Detective Sergeant with North Yorkshire Police and I work in the Missing and Exploitation team, and my particular focus is on child exploitation.
Okay, so Zoe's very kindly offered to join us today, this afternoon, to help obviously shed a light on what the child exploitation team do within the North Yorkshire Police team. So the aims and objectives within our presentation this afternoon is to look at what contextual safeguarding is, what child's criminal exploitation and sexual exploitation is, along with county lines. Zoe's going to talk about who the North Yorkshire Police Exploitation Team are and introduce a little bit about the work that they do around tackling exploitation and how they engage with the young people that they come across. I'm going to talk about the emerging themes and trends that we're seeing and look around sort of warning signs and things to spot and how that might sort of trickle into some of the work that people on the call might come into contact with. A little bit around our multi-agency child exploitation processes within North Yorkshire, so how a young person would look to be referred into our processes and how we then look to get some support and help and interventions around that young person and their family. A little bit around the NRM process, so the national referral mechanism, and how that features within our work. Disruption of exploitation, what it can look like and how we can all work together. It's not just a policing focus, and how you guys can also feature quite heavily within that. We're going to provide some case examples. Obviously, Zoe's going to kindly present some from a policing point of view, and then I'm going to present a couple from how we've picked up from a MACE perspective alongside our other partners. And within that, how important our language is when we engage our young people and their families, and how important our language is around exploitation. And then finally, what to do if you're worried about a child, and where to go with some important resources, obviously, for you guys to point you in the right direction if you are worried around exploitation. But obviously, if there is any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat pod at any point, or feel free to pop your hands up, and we'll look to cover them as we go through the topics as we go along. Okay, so what is contextual safeguarding? And this was first coined by Dr. Carleen Furman, who explores the places and spaces that young people spend their time, and looks at the harms that they might be exposed to within the community, their social environments, their school environments, within the parks, the bus stations, clubs that they might associate at, and the streets that they spend the time at. So looking at obviously the bottom left, it looks around the circles that sort of focus around that young person, and it sort of focuses outside of that young person's family home, their peer groups, their school networks, their neighbourhoods. There's lots of focus within that child's family home, but what happens to that young person, and who protects that young person once they step outside their front door? So it includes obviously the peer groups, the schools, the communities, the places and spaces that young person spends a lot of their growing up time out in once they step outside that front door, like I said. And obviously looking at the coloured boxes on the right hand side, all of those topics feature within contextual safeguarding. So you've got child sexual exploitation, extrafamilial harm, missing from home. We've got modern day slavery and human trafficking, harmful sexual behaviour, child criminal exploitation, county lines, online world, which we're seeing obviously, which is intertwined in most things that young people do, and obviously transitional safeguarding moving forwards from there. So when we look at what is child exploitation, there's no sort of set definition, unless anything obviously comes forward from there. But these are the ones that we tend to work off from the Home Office Child Disruption Toolkit. And we look at child criminal exploitation first. And this occurs where an individual or group takes advantage of an imbalance of power to coerce, control, manipulate, or deceive a child or young person under the age of 18. And the victim may have been criminally exploited, even if the activity appears consensual. And that's sort of a key thing that we often pick up at. Even if that young person appears to be consensually taking place in that activity, that it's still a criminal activity, and that young person can't necessarily consent to that activity taking place. And that coerciveness, that control, and that manipulation is often key to that. It doesn't always involve physical contact. It can take place through the use of technology, and often happens alongside sexual or other forms of exploitation. And it's often broader than just county lines, and includes instances of children forced to work on cannabis farms, or committing theft or shoplifting, pickpocketing, or even the threats towards other young people, or collecting in debts on behalf of other people. So is there anything else you'd like to come in on child criminal exploitation before I move on to CSE at all?
I think just that last point that you raised there, that it's not just about what you hear about kind of traditional county lines and the movement of drugs. I think what we often see is a bit of an uptake in thefts, isn't it, at the moment? So it's just one to really be aware of, that, you know, it's not sort of pigeonholed to just drugs, that it can go across all forms of criminality, really.
Okay. So then moving on to child sexual exploitation, often referred to as CSE. Again, this occurs where an individual or group takes advantage of an imbalance of power to coerce, manipulate, or deceive a child or young person under the age of 18 into sexual activity, in exchange for something that the victim needs or wants, and or the financial advantage or increased status of a perpetrator or facilitator. So again, you're seeing very similar words of imbalance of power, manipulation, deception, under the age of 18. And again, the victim may be sexually exploited even if that sexual activity appears consensual. So again, very similar to the criminal activity. And again, this doesn't always involve physical contact. It can also occur through the use of technology. So again, the online space very at the forefront, and sort of very prevalent within this area. So again, is there anything else you'd like to add in on the CSC front?
Yeah, just again on your last point there, Gemma, about sort of online spaces and to be really aware of those. My background is online exploitation, and I think it's really important to think about how wide that spans. Online exploitation isn't sort of constricted to any kind of geographical location. It can be national throughout the country, or it can even go globally. You could have offenders in different parts of the world that are targeting the children and the young people that we're working with. So it's really, really far-reaching and definitely on the increase.
Yeah, and I think, and just to pick up on that last point as well, it is again coming from that online background within the police myself prior to coming into this role is how victimized young people can feel when they're unfortunately fall victim of this crime. Sometimes that crime takes place in their own bedroom or within their own family home, and how hard hitting that can actually be. You know, that's taken place in a place that's supposed to be their safe zone, and how impactful that can be for that young person moving forward. So taking that into consideration moving on as well. Sorry, so okay, moving on to county line. So county line is a term used to describe gangs and organised criminal networks involved in exporting illegal drugs into one or more importing areas within the UK using dedicated mobile phone lines or other form of a deal line. There's likely to exploit children and vulnerable adults to move and store the drugs and money, and they will often use coercion, intimidation, violence, including sexual violence and weapons. So again, this is often a term that we're hearing quite of late, with the movement of drugs across those county borders, where that county line sort of term comes from. Use of bulk text messaging and aggressive marketing, and it relies on the grooming and exploitation and trafficking of vulnerable people, young people and also adults, to maximise profits and reduce the risk of detection for that perpetrator. So that perpetrator is as far removed from those drugs or that product as possible, and distancing themselves from the risk of the arrest, and that obviously that risk is then placed upon that vulnerable adult or that vulnerable young person. The use of children and vulnerable adults to expand that workforce, obviously at the littlest cost as possible, and obviously that they're then easier to manipulate and groom and to exploit. And debt bondage is quite a significant area in this line of work, and this obviously line of exploitation. A child is given the package to deliver. There's often staged robberies where the packages are then stolen. The child is then told that they've lost that package, which is of substantial value, and they now need to repay that debt. And obviously that can be hugely terrifying for that young person. And obviously then who do they turn to? They can't turn to the police because they're obviously committing crimes or feel they're committing crimes, and they're obviously trapped. They're then trapped in that network. In and around this, we often hear the term of cuckooing or address takeover. And this is where criminal exploitation of vulnerable involved in using their homes been as a base for criminal activities through intimidation for the exchange of drugs. So a drug network will move into that vulnerable person's address. They'll then literally take that address over as a network of dealing from that address in exchange for potential of drugs exchanges, the drug use. And then suddenly that person is then, oh, you need to pay us back for all these drugs. You owe us for this drugs. And then again, that person is then indebted to that network, and they will then either start to traffic drugs on behalf of that OCG network, or they'll then end up threatened or coerced into other activities. Again, extremely vulnerable setting, extremely vulnerable young people or vulnerable adults as well. So is there anything extra to add in on county lines from yourself?
I think just that point around debt bondage is that's probably the main route in that we see, isn't it, Gemma, that you'll often find children and young people who accrue some kind of debt for drugs that they're using, and they probably don't think too much of it at that point and think of the dealers as maybe their friends, and very quickly they can accrue a substantial debt that leaves them wide open to be exploited by those people. And I think that's sort of the main thing that we see in the area at the moment, isn't it? So it's just one to watch out for in terms of drug use, really.
Yeah, if there's no sort of facilitated means or funds, or if that looks like it's spiraling out of control, then that early intervention is hugely key in that area. Okay, so moving on to our next slide, I'll hand you over to Zoe to talk us through what the North Yorkshire Police Exploitation Team is looking like currently.
Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about kind of like how and why the team was set up, but at the moment this is what the team looks like. So we have one detective inspector that has responsibility for missing and exploitation, and that incorporates child and adult exploitation. So there's 3 detective sergeants, one for child exploitation, which is me, another for adult exploitation, and another for missing, which incorporates missing adults and missing children as well. We currently have 8 PCs on child exploitation, 4 PCs looking at missing children, 2 PCs looking at adult exploitation, and 2 PCs looking at adult missing persons. And what's not on that side, but actually equally important to the team, are 4 intelligence management officers that do a lot of sort of research and work in the background on our systems to make sure that we have everything that we need, really. So the team in its current arrangement as it is now was set up in about July last year, and that was following some recognition from North Yorkshire Police that we really needed to invest some resources into the area of exploitation as a whole. Prior to July, we just had 2 PCs looking at child and adult exploitation and 2 PCs for missing. So we've had quite a significant uplift, which is really good. The team, as we are now, we come from a variety of backgrounds. So some of them are on the chat today. So we've got people who have come from a response background. So responses, sort of responding to calls that come into our force control room, going to sort of emergency incidents, that type of thing. We have colleagues that have come from a neighbourhood policing background, so really embedded in the communities. And others from sort of other safeguarding roles that have transferred around. And I think, as I said before, my background is in safeguarding, but in online exploitation. What I found, it's really beneficial that we kind of all draw on each other's experience because we are quite varied. So, you know, you can't be an expert in everything. So it's been really good to share that knowledge around us. But what we all really do have in common is that we're really passionate about working with children and their families and really dealing with exploitation because it's such a massive area to tackle, really. We cover the whole of North Yorkshire and the City of York. So we have 3 PCs that look at the area of York and Selby, 2 PCs that look at Scarborough and Rydale, and then 3 PCs that look at Harrogate, Craven, Richmond and Hambleton. So we're spread out sort of all around the force. And all children who go through the MACE level 1 process and are given a high or medium risk status, which I'm sure Gemma will talk to us a little bit later on in the presentation, they have a dedicated exploitation PC from my team. We primarily work Monday to Friday office hours so that we match that of the partners that we're working with, but we're quite flexible if needs be. Then we do work outside of that to facilitate the visits and things. So kind of a day-to-day life in the team. The first thing they'll probably do is check their tasks on a morning. So we have a records management system that's set up with flags that will notify them if a child that they're involved with has been involved in any kind of police incident. And that's immediate, so that notification will come through immediately. So if they're arrested for anything, if they're charged for anything, if they're linked with a new person, so the team will review those and determine if they need to take any action, really, and that kind of direct their work for the day. So it might be that they need to do an urgent visit to that child or their family. They might need to share that information quickly with colleagues in children's social care or other partners that are supporting the families. And also they might need to talk to some of our internal colleagues as well. So if there's a child that's in police custody, then they'll need to speak to the investigation team that are dealing with that investigation. Their day will probably usually include some visits, so they will aim to meet regularly with the children and the families that they're allocated to. But obviously that's quite bespoke to the circumstances around that young person and what kind of are the preferred communication needs for them and the family as well. Sometimes we're not the best people to direct that engagement, but we still need to be involved in that picture and make sure that we know what's happening. So there'll be a lot of talking to the professionals around that family if we're not directly engaging with them ourselves. One of the things I'll do is really record sort of the behaviour and the demeanour of the children that they're working with and listen to what their concerns are, what their views are, and make sure that we really try and capture their voice. Because the last thing that we want to do is sort of take that power away from them as well. You know, if they're already being exploited, we want them to be able to really share how things are going for them. Normally in a day, they will probably attend some partnership meetings as well as subject matter experts in the areas of exploitation for children that have a known exploitation risk that are sort of involved in the MACE process. But they will go to other meetings about those children as well that are not specifically about exploitation, but are sort of around their wider care needs, so that they're quite well embedded in that team of people that are working with that child. The other main thing that they probably do on a day-to-day basis is they'll do a lot of assessing of new concerns as well. So that might be something along the lines of that we've had some intelligence to suggest that there might be a risk to a child, but that child isn't working with any other agencies or anyone as yet. So we'll do some research around that situation and look out for any warning signs that would give us some concerns about exploitation. So is there an increase in drug use? Are they spending more time away from home? Is there sort of anything going on that's a bit of a period of instability for them, which might increase their vulnerability to exploitation? A lot of partners require that a child sort of be open to their services before they can start working with them. But we have a bit of a benefit in that sense, in that we don't need that. So we're not constricted by that. And quite often we can be the first agency that actually is able to engage and then open those doors onto other services that can support. The other type of things that we do, so we'll look at appropriate instances where maybe a child abduction warning notice needs to be issued to any adults of concern around a child, that would then support in any prosecutions around child abduction further down the line if that relationship continues. We can look at using powers that are available to the police in terms of dispersal powers for locations of concern, or emergency police protection powers for children at risk of significant harm. We lead and conduct modern slavery investigations around perpetrators who are posing a risk to the children that we're working with. We'll talk about NRM a little bit further down the line, but we do a lot of work to make sure that submissions are made to the NRM to really support those children if they are involved in any criminality. And there's we try and do a lot of education around hotels, taxis, to spot the signs as well. And linking with our partners in schools, children's homes and licensing as well around any potential locations where children are gathering. What else do we do? We obviously have a section that focus on missing children. So what they'll do is review the missing episodes every single day, and they'll consider the wider risks to the children when they've been missing. So not just, you know, have they come back, but they'll look at why have they gone missing in the first place, who have they been with, where have they been with, is there any exploitation concerns while they've been missing, or any other kinds of abuse. And they'll try and really get into those push and pull factors around why have they gone missing and understand what they are, to see how we can maybe put some stability back in there to reduce that vulnerability. One of the other main things that we do, or probably more so that I and the detective inspector do, is oversee investigations that are involving the children that we're working with. to make sure that the investigation teams that are dealing with that know that there's an exploitation concern there, and make sure that they sort of factor that in when they're making any decisions about how cases are going to progress, particularly when we're thinking about whether any cases are going to proceed to court or things like that. So that takes up a big chunk of our work as well. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we do. It's definitely not exhaustive. There's lots of other things that we do, but I can't talk to you all day.
No, that's great. Thank you. And a really good overview of what the team's done and significant work since you guys have been set up. So thank you for that. Is there any questions for anybody so far, or are we okay to continue? No, okay, so we'll look to continue on then. So what does child exploitation look like in North Yorkshire? People obviously think that North Yorkshire is a very leafy rural area and it doesn't happen in North Yorkshire. Well, unfortunately it is taking place, and child exploitation can occur in any area. And it's to highlight that obviously it does happen and it can take place in any area. It's not just for the bigger cities and the larger areas. It can take place in smaller, more rural country locations. And criminals will target and look at boredom and isolation areas as well. And it's to highlight obviously the places and the spaces where young people will go. And obviously the online world, as Zoe and myself have highlighted, is vast. And it can take place both outside and also within people's home locations as well. And it can be well hidden. So we all need to be curious and not be afraid to be professionally curious and ask those questions and not be afraid to be wrong. Because what if you're right? What if you ask that question and that question is the right question and that question does end up safeguarding somebody? And it's obviously highlight that it's not just an urban issue. And obviously sometimes grooming of children and criminals will target the grooming of children in rural areas because of the isolation, the lack of, policing activity within that area, the lack of things like CCTV, the lack of presence of other professionals. With it being more rural, there's more of that travel network needed, buses, train stations, etc. And also that misconception that it doesn't happen here. So people potentially having that misconception and obviously turning, that hidden agenda off. And obviously the places and spaces, the parks, the bus stations, the beauty spots, having that consideration that it does take place in those locations, and it can be quite difficult to spot if you're not curious as to spotting those early warning signs and having your mind opened up to what those early signs can be to look out for. Okay, some of our emerging themes and trends to go over. So obviously the first one is that we appreciate that everybody is busy. Everyone is probably busier than they've ever been. And that's just to acknowledge that and obviously appreciate the work that everybody does do in the background, and the world of exploitation is no exception. We're currently seeing extremely high numbers, which is in one sense quite positive, that we're clearly having more of an awareness around exploitation and people are picking up the signs early. But it's important to highlight that this is still a very important issue within North Yorkshire. And our MACE processes are not about putting more work onto people. It's a chance to work collaboratively, and it's a chance to, problem shared, problem halved. Can we take that approach? Can we, is there something that somebody else has in their toolbox that can help you with an issue that you're feeling that you're struggling with? So come to us and can we get that collaborative approach? Our data analysis over the last 6 months has shown that there's a big gender split, with the majority of our victims of criminal exploitation being male, and sexual exploitation being female. And while this is seen as a national data picture as well, so we're not sort of skewing from the national picture, it's important to consider the impact of gender stereotypes and the consideration that girls can be victims of criminal exploitation, along with that boys can also be victims of sexual exploitation. So are we making sure our question sets for those two data sets and those two gender stereotypes are the same? Are boys being asked around sexual exploitation alongside girls being asked around criminal exploitation? And similarly, our data shows that our age of our victims is unfortunately getting younger. Again, this might be in part to victims being identified sooner, which again is a positive thing, but it's also important to consider that alongside our victims getting younger, our perpetrators are targeting victims younger, and the online world can be seen as a platform for this. And alongside that, some of our perpetrators are also getting younger alongside that as well, which again is a concerning picture to paint, unfortunately. Police data has shown us that rather encouraging that we now have a greater understanding of our exploitation type. So alongside that data, we now understand the story behind that data. We understand the picture of what's going on in that young person's background. So those young people who are flagged, we now have an increased proportion where we know the exploitation type and what's actually happening in that young person's life. And that's through the increased use of intelligence and information shared by partners like yourself who are currently on the call, sharing that information, sharing those tiny pieces that are connecting those dots, and many of which are now linked to online exploitation, which young people have been targeted online into drug supply, organised crime groups, both in North Yorkshire and surrounding counties. So again, connecting those dots into, do we need to connect that across into West Yorkshire's county, for example? The online exploitation of young people and the consideration of the online world as a contextual place and space is hugely important, not just as is singular, but online has to be considered as that. You spend so much time on there, it's their big focus. Seeing Snapchat as a social media platform is the most commonly used one, and we've had some really concerning data pictures around the use of Snapchat and its facilitation of some of our exploitation cases. And sexually coerced extortion, you might have heard the term sextortion, which unfortunately we don't like to use, but sexually coerced extortion online continues to be an emerging trend where victims are groomed online to share self-generated indecent images and they're then blackmailed afterwards. And again, there's some really useful programs later on in the week around that, and obviously financial exploitation, which again will upskill and uplift some of that information. And last, obviously, but not least, vaping, which is hugely on the agenda, both on the news, within the school networks, and obviously the facilitation of vaping around exploitation. But there's some of our emerging themes and trends that we're currently seeing across North Yorkshire. So is there anything you'd like to add in on any of those items before we move on?
I think just what you said about vaping at the end there, Gemma, that it's massively on the increase, isn't it? And is often one of the first signs that we see early on in exploitation concerns is the use of vapes or the selling of vapes or them sort of being found in and around home addresses. So it's just one to watch out for. I think vaping really, it seems to be a little bit of a gateway.
Yeah, and again, we've got lots of information around vaping and education inputs around that, what's in the vapes, really credible sites and information. So if anybody feels that they need that uplift within your education settings or for parents, carers and young people as well, then please feel free to link in with us and we can direct you to those credited sites as well. Okay, so moving on to warning signs. This again isn't an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the top signs to look out for. Obviously, as Zoe's mentioned, missings, missing at day or night, not always been reported, missing out of education, not knowing where they are, who they're with, changes in appearances, both a downturn and an upturn. Suddenly the wanting to look nice, wearing makeup, wanting to uplift their wardrobe for whatever reason, or suddenly not taking care of themselves, not taking any pride or any pride in their hygiene or appearance, talking differently, looking tired, changes in behaviour, being secretive, fearful, withdrawn, etc. A change in friendship groups. Obviously peer networks is a huge one that we look at across our MACE agendas. Who is it they're hanging around with? Who is influencing their behaviour? Who is influencing their thought processes? Again, both in person and also online. Who are they associating with online as well? Possessions, new clothing, phones, money. Again, within the credit crunch, we're not always seeing new phones and the new, high rate trainers. We're seeing the cost of a McDonald's, the cost of a sandwich, electric cards being topped up for the home addresses, things like that. the bare necessities that people will do or that are required, they're the types of possessions that we're currently seeing people being groomed for. Coping mechanisms are alcohol, drugs, self-harm, sex as a form of self-harm as well. Injuries, bruises, burns, marks, reluctant to seek medical attention, unexplained injuries as well, or bruising that doesn't naturally come up with the explanation that's been given, that doesn't match what that young person is saying, especially within our emergency departments. Be brave, be curious around asking those questions. That doesn't match up with what you're telling me. Is there something else you want to talk about? I know we've had some partners on some really useful MACE agendas where they've implemented the HEADS tool within the emergency departments. That's, again, through some of the case informations, we've had some really useful safeguarding interventions that's been put in place as a result of those curiosity from those health professionals. Online use as well, spending more time online, being secretive, distancing themselves, hiding applications within apps, putting apps within secret folders or encrypting those apps. What's the need for that? Why do you need to do that? Or having new apps that they've never previously had before, or one that I've certainly come across where they'll use an application and then suddenly delete that application as well. And again, if you're seeing that and you need any help and advice around that, then obviously please feel to get in touch around some advice as to what to do in that respect. And again, new places, spaces with no obvious connection. New locations of concern, again, is a new one that we look at within our MACE agenda. So is there anything else you would like to add in on the warning signs from your point of view?
I think just to stress the importance of missing during the day. I think when we think about missing, our minds automatically jump to kind of being missing maybe overnight and that being really unsafe, but actually being missing during the day can be equally unsafe. Like exploitation doesn't discriminate when it happens, and actually a lot of criminality is committed during the day, whether it be drug dealing, thefts, any kind of sexual exploitation. It definitely happens during the day. So if you're aware of any children or young people who are particularly not in education or are missing school and we don't know where they are, then sort of try and pay some close attention to that really and try and figure out where they could be.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so briefly go over our referral processes then and what MACE level 1 and MACE level 2 looks like. So the process in North Yorkshire for supporting young people who are at risk of exploitation are detailed within our MACE strategy, and obviously that's literally been renewed as we speak. And Kat will take you through that in great detail on Wednesday afternoon. Obviously, our new strategy is just launched, but this obviously puts protective factors in, and obviously we'll go through that MACE strategy on Wednesday moving forward. But basically, if a young person is obviously identified by a professional as potentially been at risk of exploitation, they should submit a referral form to the Children and Family Services, and that's adhering to the usual guidance and practices around consent and information sharing. This will then be received by the MAST screening team, so the multi-agency screening team, who consist of professionals from social care, early help, police, the Harrogate District Foundation Trust, so the HDFT team, and the appropriate and relevant MAST professionals are then involved in the screening of that referral and deciding on the right service to meet that child and family's needs. Depending on the outcome of the screening, an allocated worker will work with the child and their family and other professionals who are involved to identify what risk the child or young person may be exposed to. And they will then complete an exploitation risk assessment containing the views of all involved, and crucially the young person as well, if they're willing to engage in that process. And if during the course of that discussion there's any specific contextual safeguarding concerns that link the child or young person to any locations that may present a risk of harm, or individuals or groups that may pose any risk of harm by exploitation, those themes and trends are then sent across to the MACE level 2 process, and that's where they're opened up for further discussion and further further exploration from there. So MACE processes are split down into 2 levels. So MACE level 1 is obviously the risk identification process for that child. So that once that referral is completed, the exploitation risk assessment is then sent back into the MACE team for the risk level and scrutiny regarding the risk management around that child, so that individual discussion around that child. And that's regarding the contextual safeguarding concerns for that individual child and what's going on in that child's life at that time. And it allows partners to offer challenge regarding the risk level and the management plans for that young person. And obviously this discussion takes place within partners of the MACE team alongside the allocated worker and any other local professionals that are required for that young person. And the meeting will result in an agreement as to the risk level that can be one of 4 outcomes. It can be a high risk level, medium, low risk, or no risk. And the plans that will then be put in place are reviewed and agreed based on the risk level or the outcome for that young person. The MACE level 2 process is chaired across the district areas, so there's 7 in total. And this is where discussions around the information relating to the links between the children at risk or subject of exploitation, around perpetrators or individuals who may pose a risk of exploitation, locations that may pose a risk of harm, and community intelligence. And the meetings contain 4 key components. And that's the identification and assessment of perpetrators who may pose a risk, the sharing of community intelligence around perpetrators or individuals who may pose a risk by exploitation, as well as locations where harm has been caused within communities, identifying community links between victims, perpetrators, and individuals who may pose a risk by exploitation. And that's done through potential mapping exercises as well. And any other local authorities, including private residential home providers, settings around children or other young authority areas are placed in North Yorkshire. And it's to develop robust local partnership action plans to develop intelligence, pursue and prosecute perpetrators, disrupt exploitation activity within these communities. And these are key partnership meetings to attend, so we can all work together to share vital information to disrupt exploitation. And the plan is that there's no hierarchy within these meetings, and it's designed for all partners to come and be welcomed into those meetings and share key information around those areas. So if you've got pertinent information to share, you're more than welcome to attend those meetings and share that information around those places, spaces, peer groups of concern, and perpetrators of concern. Zoe, is there anything you'd like to add in on those items before we move on?
I think just to kind of summarise, I guess, Gemma, that sort of MACE level 1 is where we focus on the children and their risks and how we can support and disrupt that. And MACE level 2 is more contextual, isn't it, around the perpetrators and locations. And we really do rely on partners to join in that process in a bit of a wider context, don't we, to kind of see what other people can bring to the table to help us disrupt what's happening. Because as much as we can do as sort of police and social care and the local authority, we really do rely on other people as well to help us in that disruption. And I know we'll talk about the disruption wheel a bit later on, don't we? But yeah, we definitely welcome everybody into the MACE level 2 process and any help we can get.
Yeah, the MACE level 2 platform, you guys are really absolutely the eyes and ears on the ground. I often call you the boots on the ground within the meetings, and the information that you bring to those meetings is hugely key to the policing picture and the safeguarding of those young people in the background. And no matter how big or small you feel that information is, it's welcomed and welcome to be brought forward through information sharing and intelligence sharing. So again, please feel free to put that forward. Feel free to come and, if you've got any concerns, do I feel that I fit in that? Feel free to come and shadow a meeting, come and see what MACE processes are like if you feel that your service would like to be signed up to that. And see what it all entails and have that discussion with us. That's no problem moving forward. Okay, so moving on to trafficking and modern slavery, are often referred to as the NRM, or National Referral Mechanism. So the National Referral Mechanism is the framework for identifying victims of trafficking, slavery and servitude and forced labour or compulsory labour, and ensuring that they receive the right support. And all police and local authority staff have a legal duty to refer anyone that they think may potentially be a victim. They're not expected to be sure, so the balance of obviously that threshold is lower, and people can make a referral to the NRM if they're known as a first responder. So some statutory and non-statutory organisations are designated as first responders, and you can still call, still report modern slavery, even if you're not a first responder, via the modern slavery helpline, and obviously the details which we can share later on, and obviously in the chat pod if you needed to. So report the concerns if a child has been used for the benefit of others, including to commit any crime, to work inappropriately, or to take part in any sexual activity that they may be being moved or kept anywhere for that purpose, that they may be being trafficked, an NRM must be submitted. And being moved is any distance, not just from country to country. It can be literally from one room to another within a hotel, or it can be from one house to another across the street. The distance is really insignificant. The NRM runs alongside established safeguarding processes. It does not replace them. So if you put in a safeguarding referral in, this does not supersede that, it runs alongside that. So North Yorkshire and the City of York are currently taking part in the pilot for devolved decision making, which means that making the decisions about whether a child has been subjected to modern slavery or human trafficking now sits within the local decision making multi-agency panel, instead of nationally with the Home Office. So what that basically means is that we can turn our decisions around locally within North Yorkshire within a 90-day period from receiving the referral for that young person right through to a conclusive grounds decision. We can turn that decision around within 90 days, which is significantly quicker than what the Home Office were able to do due to obviously the backlog of numbers, which obviously again, when you look talking about disruption and safeguarding for a young person, is again hugely significant for that person moving forward. So the definition of trafficking explores three component parts: the action, the means, and the purpose. However, it's important of note that a child under the age of 18 cannot consent to their own exploitation, so there is no need to prove the means in order to prove that the child has been trafficked. So when we're considering trafficking for a young person, we just have to look at the means and the purpose when we're considering the case. So obviously that's obviously our NRM process. In a bit of a whistle-stop tour, it is a very in-depth process that we go through, but can be hugely significant and offers a lot of support for that young person moving forwards. So is there anything extra you'd like to add in on that one?
No, I don't think so. I think, as you say, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what is quite an in-depth process, isn't it? I would just say if you have any questions about NRM or whether you think any referrals should be made, then please just ask Gemma or I, and we'll be happy to talk to you in a lot more detail about it if needs be. We both sit on the panel, so we're both sort of well-versed with what happens there.
Okay, and again, having that devolved decision-making process within North Yorkshire, again, is hugely significant for our area and for our young people. So again, if you want any extra information around that, then please feel free to contact us about that as well. Okay, so moving on to disruption and what this looks like. And obviously, the definition of disruption can be really broad. It's to prevent something, a system, a process, an event that is continuing as usual or as expected. And when we talk about exploitation, it can often just be attributed to the work of the police making arrests or putting somebody away in prison. However, it's much more important to think about the disruption on a much larger scale and as sort of multifaceted approach of a wide variety of partners. So obviously, again, feel free to pop in the chat bar any ideas that you think of, any disruption that you or your agency or your partnership could get involved in, or any ideas of what you think disruption might be. But in a nutshell, anyone can disrupt. Exploitation disruption is like a giant jigsaw, and everyone has got that missing piece of that jigsaw puzzle, again, no matter how big or small. And I often think of this as a bit of a wheel. If you take a chunk of that wheel out, it stops going round eventually. So if we can wrap that victim or that young person up and safeguard that young person, then that's taken off that section of the wheel. If we can target hard in that location or space, or intervene in that location or space, then that's that section taken out of that wheel. And if we can disrupt and target that perpetrator, again, no matter how we do that, whether it's through policing tactics or through civil tactics, or potentially safeguard that perpetrator as well, then that is that section of that wheel taken out. But it's not just down to policing tactics. Often we can look at civil orders, we can look at trading standards, we can look at social care interventions. There's all sorts of different things. And we look at the child exploitation disruption toolkit through the Home Office interventions, as well as various different ideas. Housing interventions, etc., just to name a few of the different ideas that get brought forward on a monthly basis within our MACE meetings. So is there anything extra to add in from your point from that one?
I think for me, just to really stress the importance of looking at how can we disrupt the perpetrators and the locations. I think what sometimes happens in exploitation is we focus so much on the child that's at risk, that creates additional pressure for them in a way, with lots of other people coming into the picture for them and working with them. And actually, we can safeguard that child, but what then tends to happen is that the perpetrators and the locations will just move on to the next child. So we really need to get in there and think about how can we disrupt the perpetrators and how can we disrupt those locations. And like Gemma said, it's not necessarily has to be police led. It can be something as simple as a particular location like badly lit. Do we need some additional lighting in there to deter people from going there? It could be something so simple. But we really do need to think about those two things and not just focus on the children themselves.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So when we look at who can undertake disruption, obviously this is a list of people who potentially are signed up to our MACE arrangements, and who can come to our MACE arrangement. And in short, the answer is everybody. If you think you've got pertinent information around community intelligence, you are more than welcome to come to and share that information. And if it's part of that exploitation disruption, then yeah, please come and share it. Whether you're a taxi driver, or you're part of the school staff, or you lead youth intervention, it's looking at some of the key services to help spot the signs, help safeguard, gather information, picking up signs. Are you a taxi driver that regularly goes to a hotel of concern, taking young people that are constantly intoxicated to and from, who are then, getting dropped off with, concerning looking adults, on a regular basis, weekend period? Do you know where to share that information to? Young people being picked up, taken to A&E services, that heads tool that we talked about with our ED departments, feeling frightened or distressed when you're given that information around adults that are taking you into emergency departments. People on the door staff being able to sort of intervene in concerning adult, checking for ID and things like that. That list is absolutely endless. Lollipop people checking people coming up across the road. There's not a great deal that doesn't go on the patch of that road that person wouldn't get to see. The vehicles coming, going, interactions with young people, people getting in and out of vehicles, car regs coming backwards and forwards, places of concern, all those interactions. Again, that list can be absolutely endless. So it's not just, again, police-led. Those little snippets of information, that intelligence, can be hugely key to that bigger picture coming forward. So is there anything else to add on that one?
I think, just as you've said, really, Gemma, that everybody can play a part. There's so many different organisations and pockets of people that can really have an input on exploitation. And we are so reliant on everybody feeding information and intelligence to us that then allows us to take some of the disruptive tactics that we can do in terms of arrests or warrants or things like that. We really do rely on the information coming from partners to allow us to be able to do that. So just my plea to everybody, in the meeting is really just to share that with the people that you work with as well, and just think about how they might be able to support us in tackling exploitation too.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we'll move on to some case examples to try and bring that disruption alive and just sort of reiterate how your information feeds into us, and then obviously how that then works on the ground. So I'll hand you over to Zoe, who's going to give you 2 examples from police case examples, if I can, Zoe.
I will. I'm just conscious of time, Gemma, so I might just do one because I know that you've got an example that you wanted to share as well. So I'll probably just focus on the first example.
Yeah, that's no problem.
So the first example is around child criminal exploitation concerns for a high-risk young person exploited into drug dealing. So concerns for this young person first began to surface probably around June last year. And it began with little bits of information around drug debts and that he'd had possession of vape pens in schools. So what we talked about earlier is those sort of early warning signs and things to watch out for is what we were seeing. And there were some concerns that those vape pens were being sold onto school friends as well. Also a bit of a concern about where was he spending time during the day, and visiting properties that we thought could be linked to drug use. So some early warning signs there that something was maybe a bit amiss. And the unallocated PC for the missing exploitation team was assigned. Things for this young person escalated really, really quickly within a matter of weeks. It sort of went from kind of like 0 to 100. A significant quantity of drugs were found in this young person's bedroom, and that increased the debt to the dealer significantly when those were seized by the police. There was a constant stream of information that this young person was storing, holding drugs, and his debt was just ever increasing. We were also able to establish that he was travelling out of area via train to collect drugs as well. And eventually this young person was arrested by the British Transport Police, having been found in possession of drugs on the train networks. And further drugs were located at his home address as well. He was taken to police custody, and it was actually during his police interview was the first time that he opened up and said that he was being exploited. Throughout this period of time, the exploitation PC that was assigned to him was really, really proactive in trying to develop that relationship with him, along with other partners, so with his social worker, and support from the Iverson Trust as well, as it was PACE then. So there'd been a lot of conversations happening with this young person and his family, but this was really the first time that he felt able to open up about that. The exploitation PC was really proactive, I said, in terms of developing that relationship and maintaining those links to make sure that information was shared with partners, so everybody knew what was happening, because things were happening on a daily basis. It really needed daily conversations to understand what was going on. They were also instrumental in making sure that the NRM submission was made to support this young person should any charges be brought that would enable a defence for him. And the exploitation PC was quite key really in maintaining that link between all of the agencies working together. She arranged for a number of safeguarding measures to be put in place as well to reduce the risk to the young person and his family while this was all happening. So we can do things like put markers on telephone numbers. So if any calls are made to our force control room, then it immediately highlights those concerns to the person receiving that call, which is really important. And there was a lot of raising of awareness of the circumstances of this young person, and that there's a requirement for police officers that maybe didn't work with him on a day-to-day basis, that all reports associated to this person needed to be attended. We needed to conduct checks to make sure that they were safe and well, and we needed to submit partnership information sharing forms following those incidents so that everybody had the information. We could also do things like panic alarms at home addresses as well to make sure that any risks that presented themselves to the address were immediately notified to us. All along in the background, we were doing work to try and establish who the people supplying the drugs to this young person were, and 2 people were arrested in relation to the exploitation of that young person. As the young person sort of went through this process, the exploitation PC was quite instrumental in getting him some mental health support. And as he sort of started to open up, she noticed a big change in his demeanour. Sort of presented as quite down, isolated, and really upset at points as well. So the PC, along with the social worker, arranged for some mental health support to come out and see him at his home address. We started to see an improvement for the young person following that, so sort of more time in school, less drug use, but was still quite guarded around his connections. And so while he was open about saying that he had been exploited, he was too fearful to share with us anything more beyond that, really. So where we are now with this young person, he's doing really well. He's coming home early, he's spending time with his friends, he's not using cannabis or drugs anymore, he's no longer in debt. The investigative team that were dealing with his arrest in relation to the drugs he was found in possession of didn't actually manage to identify any additional evidence of exploitation throughout their investigation. But through the good working relationships with the Exploitation PC, Children's Social Care, the Iverson Trust, and everybody working with this young person, they had a really good understanding of the concerns that we all had around exploitation, and they decided that it wasn't in the public interest to prosecute this young person, which was a really positive outcome for him. Unfortunately, there wasn't sufficient evidence to prosecute the two people who were arrested in connection with his exploitation, but actually looking at the outcome of what's happened, everybody working together has actually been able to make a real difference to this young person and his family and get him out of the situation that he felt really, really trapped in. He's gone on to say that he wants to help people to understand exploitation more and educate us as professionals on the things to look out for and what led him to being in that situation. So that's really sort of come full circle for him a little bit, really. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share his example with you today.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Zoe. So again, conscious of time, we'll get moving on. So look at partnership examples. We had a location of concern that had been raised to us through the MACE agenda. This had come from one of our health partners following an interaction with a young person with through one of the emergency departments. They'd attended a location following alcohol being sold to them and a vape pen being sold to them underage. The young person was 12 at the time and intoxicated, and information was shared that the dad had picked them up from the bus station, and the young person's friends had called the dad due to the concerns. They'd presented to the emergency department due to the level of intoxication, and it was really key that the doctor showed some sort of real professional curiosity about what the young person had found themselves in. And asked lots of questions, really curious questions around what had happened within this location, how they'd come to get the substances, etc. Probably moreover than what your standardised questions, which was really positive to hear. The questions and the answers that were then given were then formulated on a safeguard and referral form that was then swiftly submitted, which was then coupled along with some police intelligence that was then swiftly acted on by several departments within the police. And obviously that was really, really positive to hear that those referrals went in obviously very swiftly. Not only safeguarding that young person and obviously getting some positive interactions with that young person, but also safeguarding other potential young people that were coming and going from that locations of concern, potentially been sold intoxicating substances from the location as well. In a nutshell, the location was closed down by both police and trading standards due to illegal selling of substances, vapes and alcohol. The owner or person who had sold the item was arrested and inadvertently became an adopted MACE perpetrator of exploitation for a period of time, which obviously brought them under closer scrutiny. There was lots of further information shared around that location. Trading Standards began an operation around the location and seized several items from within the locality, within the premise. And education providers uplifted a lot of information around the vapes and alcohol sales within the school networks, obviously to parents, carers, and also young people as well. And obviously all this stemmed from professional curiosity and good information sharing. And we had regular updates within our MACE agenda from our health professional that attended as well, which was really positive to hear. The young person was obviously referred into Children and Family Services, who supported the family, obviously put relevant safeguarding in, and obviously put extra interventions around that young person, and trading standards continue to look and intervene within that location, and obviously continue to put reparations in with that locality, and moving on from there. The school networks have taken up education inputs from North Yorkshire Horizons around vape sales and obviously vape education. They've taken inputs from that and advice from North Yorkshire Horizons, and I think that's been welcomed across the school network within that locality as well. So not only safeguarding that individual young person from that singular piece of intelligence and referral, but safeguarding far more others across that education network as well. So real positive 2 pieces of disruption information just stemming from little pieces of information that's come from there. Okay, so moving on to some of our final slides then about how it's obviously language is imperative, and that the correct terminology when we're engaging with young people, and obviously extremely vulnerable. Using appropriate terminology and discussing individuals who are exploited or at risk of exploitation. It can imply that that person is complicit in any way, responsible for the crimes that have happened or may have happened to them. That must be avoided, and obviously that can make or break a case. Victim blaming language may reinforce messages from perpetrators around shame and guilt, which is obviously hugely important, which in turn prevents disclosures, which again, they're difficult enough to obtain. Obtaining those disclosures is hugely important. And victim language, blaming language in records could prevent cases from progressing to court and can be used against victims by defence, which again can be hugely disruptive as well. So just a brief example of how to sort of adopt that language. So an example of that they would not cooperate, they would not engage with police, or they wouldn't engage with services, that lays blame on the individual. So suggestive alternatives, they did not feel safe enough to disclose. They didn't appear they feared negative repercussions for disclosure. So they're just different ways, changing a couple of words within a sentence can be hugely imperative for that person, can be hugely imperative as to how their case is even perceived by obviously prosecution and defence. And obviously moving on to our next slide, which is a video that probably highlights it far more seriously and far more succinctly than I'm obviously trying to do at the moment. But this is a video around language written by young people of victims of exploitation, and how imperative that language can be. So hopefully it'll show a quick 2-minute video, and then we'll be on to our final wrap-up slides from there.
These are real statements that professionals have used to describe victims of child sexual exploitation.
The language you use matters.
It affects how people see us.
It makes us feel like what's been done to us is our fault.
And it makes us feel less of a person.
Professionals need to recognise our vulnerability.
We want you to see us as children and as victims.
The only person that should be blamed is the perpetrator.
We depend on you professionals to keep us safe.
Negative language reinforces negative attitudes to victims of exploitation.
And negative attitudes leads to systematic failures to protect us.
Helping us starts with the language you use, so choose it carefully.
Thank you.
Yes, so there's lots of resources on our website around positive use of language, lots of links on our North Yorkshire Safeguarding website. So please obviously feel free to grab those links wherever possible. And if you need any help in finding those links, obviously please give us a shout after the presentation and we can guide you on those. Okay, so myself and Zoe, you've talked endlessly throughout the presentation around community partnership intelligence. And obviously this QR code will take you directly to that intelligence portal. Can't stress importantly with regards to disruption and that community intelligence, how important that information is. Sharing concerns around an incident, suspicious activity, something that just makes you professionally uncomfortable, it just doesn't sit right, then please share that information through. And obviously there's the link with the QR code straight into that information sharing portal. Obviously, we've got our Be Aware site, which Kat mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation. It's a one-stop shop for all of our disruption toolkits. There's information for young people, parents, carers, professionals, communities and local businesses, information around what to do around child exploitation, how to open up that conversation with a young person, what to do if you're a parent and carer and you want information around exploitation. There's links to all of our partners that come to MACE. And if there's something on there that you think is missing or something that you think should be on there, then again, please let us know. And we regularly update the site and we can get that on there if it's a useful resource. And obviously we can credit that information and put that on there. That's not a problem. So just looking to recap, and obviously we'll come to Zoe as well, but signs of exploitation can be subtle and can be similar to adolescent behaviour. Appreciate how difficult that can be when we're dealing with teenagers and how often the hormones fluctuate. But again, be curious, be professionally curious. And again, there's links there to how to open up those conversations, use the vital eyes and ears and links within the community. Consider that child's online behaviours as well, the online space, the online world as a place and space, as you would the park, the bus stop, the train station. Use our resources, the Be Aware site. There's loads of 1-minute guides around a lot of the information that we have. Familiarise yourself with the community intelligence, share that intelligence, again, no matter how big or small, no matter how insignificant you think that might be, share it in. If it doesn't mean anything in the background, then let the hub intelligence share that out and screen that information out. But if you share it in, then it's for them to determine. Keep up to date with bulletins and partnership bulletins and social media channels. There's lots of recent and useful up-to-date information around all of our various topics. And if there's anything you'd like any help with, then please feel free to get in touch. Obviously, my email address is there. If I'm not the right person to give you that advice, I'll certainly do my damnedest to try and find that right person and put you in touch with the right person that can be. And obviously, final point, that everybody can assist in the disruption of exploitation. And obviously casting that question back to you guys, what could you do and what could your organisation do? And if you think that you could be a part of that disruption, you're more than welcome to come and join us and obviously be a part of that. And obviously, thank you for taking part and obviously sitting through our presentations. Or is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just to echo what you said, Gemma, really, just thank you everyone for coming today to listen to us. And if you have any questions, any worries, any queries about anyone at risk of exploitation, just get in touch with us and we'll help you out where we can.
Thank you so much, Zoe and Gemma. What an amazing session. I've really enjoyed it, and there's lots of great feedback coming in the chat as well. If you do have any comments or feedback, please share it with us via the chat. It's always nice to hear your thoughts. We'll stick around for an extra couple of moments just in case there's any questions, but I'm going to stop the recording now. But if anyone does have any questions that they want to ask, please stay on and we'll be around for a few more minutes.